Okay. All right, you guys. Hi, I'm here with Dr. Charles Koss. So he's an ancient Earth. Well, I don't know. What do you call yourself? Like, how would you? What do you? He's a YouTuber slash researcher slash author. He's like more Indiana Jonesy than me, really. But he's like a researcher, maybe. Would you say that?
You could say that. You could call it, an ancient mysteries researcher. You could call it a historian, an archaeologist. I suppose you're an archaeologist too, right?
I formally, like academically, I'm an art historian, but I'm more interested in archaeology. Yeah. So
same. That's archaeology. They're art historians. They're art connoisseurs, aren't they?
yeah, exactly. It's an art more than a science, really. So but I actually am really obsessed with rocks. Like I have a minor in geology, and I've been like, I'm really, I like my strata, and I like fossils, and like, I don't know. I mean, I'm into all that. Just anything old or UFO or future. I'm kind of like in both worlds. So yeah. And I see you are too. You have some theories in all those realms. So we're going to get to that. So okay, first question I kind of wanted to get to with it is, so you have a PhD in history, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how, like being in the formal academia world or setting, coming from that, how do you then, do you get a lot of pushback from being in kind of like the alternative ancient history mysteries world?
Well, no, actually, because they tend to mind their own business. They're too busy with their own work, and they just push their own work. This is how it works. They're just the academics are they're very self-oriented, and they're always pushing their own work. They're not really, honestly, and I have to say, I've had not much interaction with them. To be perfectly honest, I made a book about pyramids a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and I've had not much interaction at all or interest at all, which leads me to suspect these guys, they're only interested in their own work. They're not interested in finding out the truth by reading other works.
Yeah, I think that's true for sure. But it is interesting how you have people like Graham Hancock seems to get a lot of pushback. A lot of, I guess it depends on, like, the more famous you become, the more they'll start balking. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
Well, exactly. I mean, Graham Hancock was on the BBC Panorama program, like I think it was in the mid-90s. I remember I saw it pop up on TV, and I thought, well, what the hell is this? He's going on about 10,500 BC. This is going to be controversial. So it turned out to be very controversial, and they didn't like it too much, did they?
No, they didn't. And and even like he's been on I can't remember that guy who was on Joe Rogan with him, who was like a skeptic, who was kind of like battling him on everything that he said. I find those kind of programs very, some people like really get off on that, and I don't like that. It's just too much anxiety for me. Okay, so how did you get into all this? How did you start getting, okay, so like let's just say that you're into, there's a lost ancient civilization. So walk us through that and how you got into that.
Okay, so basically, I've always been into Erich von Däniken's books. His books are amazing. I read them as a small child. I read them as a bigger child. I read them as a teenager. And I kept reading them, and I've read most of them. And he has some very interesting theories about man's knowledge in the past. And he's shown that man had some kind of high technology in the past. And he suggests the possibility that maybe it's something from outer space, maybe it's aliens, maybe it's ET seeding mankind, maybe it's something else beyond which we understand. And that idea in the 60s was very popular, and it's been refined these days into simply, an ancient lost civilization of humans, because that's easier for us, isn't it? That's easier for us to understand, and maybe it's more likely. So this lost civilization of humans, I was reading, I was in the university library in like early 2000s, and just browsing everything, and they have amazing collections. And they had a whole shelf full of books of the Indian Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata, I think it means something like the Great India or something. It's a holy book. And for them, it's holy to read it, just to read all of it. And it's huge. It's a whole shelf of books. And I open it. It's all about literally spaceships, high technology, missiles, anti-missile missiles, nuclear weapons, ancient warfare. What the hell's going on? So I thought to myself, yeah, okay, so it seems there was some high-tech civilization, because we can understand that as technology, but perhaps even the transcribers of this book in the Stone Ages or later times would be unable to understand this. So what's going on?
So does it go into Vinimas or and like you know, like places that can only be like that place in what is it in Sri Lanka, Surgata, the one that's like on a rock plateau that the only way you could get to it is flying? Is it go into that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, it talks about flying cities. It talks about the demons who are flying in a city which has bright shining lights. It says they're shot out of the sky. They have one city which to escape from another set of gods, they fly underwater, and in order to destroy them, they actually drop something like a nuke on the ocean, and they evaporate the ocean in order to destroy their city. So. Wow. I know, and I'm reading all this, and I'm thinking, you know, okay, there's something going on here, because the people who wrote this book would be unable to fully grasp what happened, and why is it a holy book in the first place? Why do they preserve this for generations? It must be because they don't want the memory of this to be lost.
Yeah, but it's odd that it in a way it is lost, because like there's I don't know, people don't pay attention to any of this kind of thing. So okay, so based on all your research and travels and everything you've done right now, like where are you currently sitting on what's the story? Like if you had to paraphrase what's the story of our past, like, so are you going with like is it just man? Is it like gods? Is it aliens? Is it like, did they go somewhere? Did they breakaway civilization? Did they die off? Was it a comet? Do you think it's like what's your take on all of it?
You know what? It's many catastrophes. It's many catastrophes. For example, even starting 30,000 years ago, there seems to have been a big catastrophe which started to destroy all the giants, all the megafauna. I theorized that one way this could have happened is, well, you know, I'll say I reckon the Earth shrank. You know, I reckon the Earth's a different size to what it used to be. If people talk about expanding it, if it can expand, it can shrink. You shrink the Earth, raise the oceans, and not only that, but when you lift up water from underground, you release air bubbles and toxic gases. And this could have wiped out, this could be responsible for wiping out all this stuff. I'm actually a bit skeptical about comets and stuff from outer space. You know, they talk just very easily about a comet coming down, hitting the atmosphere, and evaporating all the ice in the Arctic, and it all rains down. And I'm thinking, is there really enough energy in a cometary impact to do all this stuff? Or is it something that the Earth's doing? Or is it something that the sun's doing? And I'm more inclined to believe those things. But yeah, there's been bombardment from space, Carolina Bays in America, yeah. What happened to Egypt in 3100 BC? The civilization was wiped out and started again from Dynasty 1. The old history was wiped out, and they think it's because of a comet which may have impacted in Austria. And I read in the controversial Aria Linda manuscript that they say there was a great catastrophe and all of Germany was burnt up. And I'm thinking, if this is an invented, so-called forged manuscript, it sounds pretty much like what happened in Austria, that they theorize happened. So there you go.
So back to the shrinking and the expanding Earth. Okay, so you have the concept of Pangea, how everything like fit together as a you know, like one thing. Like you definitely can see it with like South America and Africa, like that totally looks like it goes into each other. But then, so so do you think that it's almost like the earth breathes in and breathes out, like it shrinks and it expands, or do you think it's like ever shrinking, or like what, like how, because I hear, I've also followed the Electric Universe, and they have whole other theories on like what's going on with all that, but they don't believe in continents or the continental drift theory at all. So walk us through what the shrinking and the expanding earth thing is for you.
Sure thing. So like you, Nikki, I too did a geology subject at uni, and we had a professor called Ian Plimer, and he's quite famous because he speaks about, he actually opposes some of the climate change theories, but I won't go into any of that. But anyway, he has a theory that, yes, the Earth is expanding. And this guy was the head of the geology department at Melbourne Uni. You know, he knows what he's doing. He's written about 100 papers. And he said, yes, the Earth is probably expanding. And he said in future, it won't just be plate tectonics. It'll be a combination of plate tectonics and expanding Earth, which is taught to students. And he reckons that's a decent way to explain, you know, the separating of the continents. But the thing is, if the Earth is expanding, if it can change size in one direction, what's to stop it changing size in the other direction?
Good point.
That's the thing. What's to stop it changing size in the other direction? So I sort of think to myself, and anything that expands can shrink. Engineers know this. And what's the mechanism for this? So I was thinking maybe we don't know what's powering the inside of the Earth. We say, oh, look, there's radioactivity, there's all this. I reckon it's a type of star, a small type of star, and stars are known to change size. That's one of the things that's responsible for their variability. And with the change in size, boom, what's happening to the crust? Well, the crust is a garbage layer floating on the surface. We're literally floating, and an earthquake is, just a, it's like rocking the boat,
Yeah.
So if the Earth shrinks, well, this can cause changes. Could it have uplifted the Altiplano in Bolivia? Now, I'm not convinced it was uplifted, but Artur Poznański thought that the Altiplano was uplifted out of something that he said was at the equator. He said it was at sea level, and he said it was uplifted. So if you're compressing the Earth, boom, you create mountains. Suddenly, there is a mechanism for mountain formation, whereas before they only said, "Oh, the continent's coming together." Is right. Causing mountain formation. Okay.
Same thing with Salt Lake in Utah. I mean, that's also kind of that's like, I heard you talk about some of the other examples of just randomized giant salt lakes that, have some sea creatures in them. And you're like, okay, just randomly.
That's right. I mean,
cool.
Yeah, so for example, in geology for hundreds of years, there have been the flood people and the Ice Age people. And the flood people looked at striated rocks with scratches on them, and they said, oh, the flood pushed them around. And then later on they said, oh, glaciers pushed them around. So another type of water pushed them around. And the flood people said, hang on, look at that, look at those lakes high up in altitude in the mountains. They're saltwater lakes, like I think it's Lake Van in Turkey. And why they got salt in them? What's going on? And you actually find salt lakes everywhere. I'm not convinced they're necessarily ocean salt, but lots of these lakes do have ocean creatures in them. We don't know why. They've got mysterious creatures from the distant past in some of these lakes, some of these deep lakes. And that was used as an argument for, I think it was used as an argument for the flood, but it could also be used geologically as an argument for radical changes in the level in more recent times than we suspect.
Well, I always go back to like when I'm looking at, like right now I've been hunting Amorites, like the shells like this, but I have a bunch of ones that are like as big as a tire. And I'm in Dallas area. They're all over it. And you go to a construction site, and when they dig far enough down, when they aren't working on the weekends or whatever, you can go in, you can like search and you can find some. As I'm like working this, I'm going, everything. Like if you think of woolly mammoths, dinosaurs, like all this other, any little shells that you would find from way back when, something was different about the Earth that either everything got to be older or there was, it wasn't just like it was giant because it was giant. Like there was something within the atmosphere that allowed for it to also be giant. Like even the leaves, even the plants, even the, when you find prehistoric palm leaves or something, they're huge, way bigger than our stuff is now. So I'm just kind of thinking like, we had to have had a different gravity, or because it can't just be like a different air. It had to also be, for example, the biggest animal that we have right now is a what, blue whale or something, like maybe a sperm whale, some kind of whale. And it would, if it was out of water, it would compact on its own skeleton. Like it's too heavy to even support its own weight. Like it's the gravity would condense on it. So I think about the same thing. Dinosaurs wouldn't technically be able, even if a dinosaur was like Jurassic Park, like bred and was able, it would die because it would crush its own self with our gravity. So I think to myself like, well, then there's something about the earth that we 100% do not know and don't understand without.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have similar experiences. Like you go out in Western Victoria, you see where there used to be like chasms, where there used to be mighty rivers and things, and they talk about an ice age as responsible for all this at the moment. You know, that's the current theory. Temperatures were much lower, and there were glaciers that they use glaciers for everything at the moment.
Right.
But maybe there were other factors involved, because I've noticed humans have this kind of tunnel vision. You know, we see one thing, you know, we just see one thing at a time, and we're not aware that there's so many things at work, at play. But, you know, I totally agree with you. The earth was, you get the experience as a naturalist, as you are, you know, walking out in the bush, you see, or in the desert, you see that, yes, it wasn't like this before. And it was very different. Yeah, for sure. I've felt that as well.
I mean, like I've been in the middle of the desert and found shark teeth. You know, I found some aquatic dinosaur teeth in northern Texas. I mean, it's all over. It's just crazy. But I mean, I also found a bunch of petrified wood when I was walking around the Egypts and you know, so I right around the bent pyramid, I picked up like a piece of petrified wood about this big. So
Wow.
that obviously wasn't always like that either. So maybe that could go with some kind of what happened at there at some point. So anyway, okay, so let's see. Okay, so tell us about your books. Like you just wrote one in 2020, right?
I wrote one, but then I saw it was not quite finished, so I had to remove it, and I'm still working on it. I got no time to work on it, but that was called Proof of the Gods, and I will finish it. And that contains lots of latest stuff that I've put on my YouTube channel, lots of latest theories and stuff, which basically show that in the ancient past, yes, there was a high-tech civilization on the planet. One of the proofs of which is DNA, if you want to hear about it.
Let's hear
So
it. Come on.
the thing is, in the Bible, so what happened was this: I'm sitting at home, and we're talking about the Bible. I'm talking to my brother, and we're talking about, you know, the rib, the Adam's rib, and it's used to make Eve, is it not? And my bro says, yeah, so there's one missing. And then I'm looking at him and I say, one missing. And there's something turning up in my brain. And I'm thinking, hang on a sec. Adam really does have one missing with his, the Y chromosome is called a Y chromosome in Adam, in man, because it's shorter than in the female. And that's the genetic difference between males and females. So hang on a sec. So how come the Bible is accurate with regards to chromosomes, right? And the thing is, we have 24 ribs, 12 on each side. One missing is 23. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 chromosomes, 23 alleles, one missing. So we have one missing in that way as well. So hang on, is it actually talking about chromosomes? Is it talking about DNA? Is it talking about, did they take Adam's DNA and create a woman just with that DNA? And is that some ancient genetic experiment? That's technology.
In a weird way, it would almost have to be inverse though, because like we all start out with the double X, and how you become a boy is like you have to lose. Like like when we're embryos, we all start out as female, and then like a male is developed within 6 weeks or something. I can't remember. Like so it's weird that it would have to be. It seems like it would be different if it was like we all started out with the X and a Y, and then if you grew another leg and became in double X, and then you became a chick. That
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a funny story.
it is a funny
No,
story. That's interesting though. I haven't thought about it like that, but yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff with the DNA is really starting to come out more and more interesting. And I mean, I do think that ancient times, they obviously, I mean, we have examples of skulls that have had surgery on in like South America and and then healed over and I mean, they had some medical knowledge that we don't even know about.
oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah. And I kind of think if they did, because I don't know for sure, but if they did, it was in really far off times, like even before 10,000 BC, because what archaeologists find is just Stone Age all the way. So it was a really long time ago.
So do you think that everybody just sort of naturally died off? Like let's talk about giants, okay? Like the red-headed giants or the giants. Like, so do you think that this group of hominins just maybe, I don't know, maybe they could no longer live in the earth because like the atmosphere, maybe they're like the same thing as the woolly mammoths were, like they're just too big for like the giant sloths or whatever, like they're too big to like live anymore. Do you think they just sort of got killed off, died in all these deluges, or do you think that they are the gods and maybe they went somewhere?
I think they died off, and also they were probably genocided. I think giants would include in the Bible would probably include giant creatures such as dinosaurs. They are finding dinosaurs with flesh attached, with feathers attached, in swamps. Yeah. Lately, they've been finding it. They found a T-Rex with feathers. So these things seem to have died a lot more recently than they're suggesting. There's a fellow in the US, and I forget who he is or where he's from, but he's been doing carbon dating, and he sent off bits of dinosaurs to the laboratories. And they said, we're not going to test this because it won't be accurate. That's a dinosaur you're showing us. It's, they're 65 million years old. It won't be accurate. Right. But the ones who do test it for him, it comes back to around 30,000 BC, which is when the comet bombardments occurred in America, the Carolina Bays. So I reckon these dinosaurs have been around recently. They were called dragons. We know about dragons in mythology. Yep. Otherwise it would be a little bit of a coincidence as to why we've got these dragons and no dinosaurs to explain them in the mythology. So that's one type of giant. And as for the redheads, they seem to have lived in Central Europe, Eastern Europe. I believe they originated alchemy. They took it around the world. They made alchemical stone monuments with alchemical melted stone facades. Where did they go? I think they were genocided. There's always been hatred, actually, of unfortunately of ginger people, and I think it might be genetic. It's true. I mean, you look at, for example, the British themselves are red-headed people. The red-headed people from Central East Europe and Britain, that's where they come from. And the English themselves are partly red-headed. And they did incredible discrimination against the even more red-headed Irish throughout their history. If you go to Ireland, they always go on about how bad the English were, and they used to pick on the redheads. That's how they knew they were Irish. I reckon there's some hatred in humans of redheads. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I have a lot of redheads in my family. So yeah. Okay, so you think that Atlantis is old? Do you still think this? Like, you're tell us. Okay, I'm not gonna spoil it. You tell us where you think Atlantis is and what Atlantis is for you, because I think this is really interesting.
Okay, so Atlantis is ancient UK, and the reason for this is you look at where the strength is in the world. In the last few hundred years, it's been UK. Among a few other European countries. They're an island, they're sheltered, they've got plenty of redheaded genius people. Redheads are very intelligent. And the other thing about them is being sheltered from Europe, that they can have a naval empire. They've had metal. We know that ancient metal was used, was traded, was dug up there, and it was traded with the Mediterranean. What I did was I found a map in a medieval chronicle that I actually studied as part of my PhD, written by a very careful monk called Matthew Paris. And he seems to have written, transcribed an ancient map. I reckon this map is at least 5,000 years old, because it places Silbury Hill right in the centre of England. And he didn't know what Silbury Hill was, but he wrote Salisbury or Silbury on the map. And not only that, but there's a road going north, there's a road going east-west, and the road going north has a couple bridges. And in the Atlantis legend, it says they had roads to the north in Atlantis, with bridges to the north. And where were canals dug? The Atlanteans dug canals. We know the Britons dug canals, the dikes. They may have been flooded with water at one time. Britain is the way to other islands, perhaps to the opposite continent, which is America. That's in the Atlantis legend. There's no other country which is the way to other islands and then to the opposite continent. That's it. That's Britain. That's the ancient UK. And we know the ancient UK sank. Doggerland next door to it, and parts of the UK itself are now underwater. Parts of Wales. Ancient architects put out a video.
And Doggerland did sink, what, 30,000 years ago? Or when did No, I think Doggerland sank during the Younger Dryas. Doggerland sank like 12,000 years ago or something.
It started to sink at that time. That's when temperatures actually, what happened was temperatures actually really, they cooled down in the Younger Dryas, and they really warmed up, and people actually moved there, and then it sunk. And by about, I reckon it was all over by about 5,000 to 3,000 BC is what they're saying. And that's about when ancient Egypt pops up, isn't it?
Yep.
So I reckon the Egyptians are from there, partly. Not all of them, obviously, but some of them, some of their ancestors are from there. And that's why they have the Atlantis legend in Egypt, because they're actually from there. Why else would they have a legend about the Atlantic?
Do you think that, so you think Stonehenge is connected to the Atlantis civilization? Like Salisbury, Avebury, like all that? Like, you think that's all that megalithic culture was probably old Atlantis?
I'm not so sure about Stonehenge. But certainly Silbury Hill would be connected to the Atlantis legend. Silbury is also probably, it is probably Avalon as well, where King Arthur was buried, because it's probably the sacred place, which would make King Arthur a prehistoric king. We can't find him in the Dark Ages. He may as well have been prehistoric. I reckon actually King Arthur, because he actually took over foreign countries. He's mixed up with Roman generals who also took over foreign countries around England or parts of France, but there's something prehistoric about him. Merlin built Stonehenge. So that this puts him in prehistory. There have been books on this saying, one called Arthur's Place in Prehistory. If he was a prehistoric king, that sort of gels with the idea of ancient UK, or if it was Atlantis, being a naval power, taking over bits of the continent, which they did, because we know the Beaker culture on the Atlantic coast was a strong naval power. These were the people who built Stonehenge, and they have the same culture all up and down the Atlantic coast in archaeology.
Okay, so what do you think about, have you looked at that Bright Insights, that Jimmy Guy's thing on the what is it, the Eye of the Sahara being Atlantis? Or yeah, like what do you think about that whole theory?
Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting theory. It was originated by a guy called Mud Fossil. The Mud Fossil channel. He has interesting ideas that all stones are actually biologically formed. I think he goes a bit too far, and I think he may have gone a bit too far with this theory as well. The main objection I have, and also that a channel called CFAPS has, his name's Chuck, is that Atlantis should be underwater with all the rises of sea levels. And this thing is actually, it looks to me like some kind of mountain volcano. And
although I have heard people, like, there is some blogs about people who've actually somehow made it there. And they do say there is like pottery shards, and there are artifacts like around the Eye of the Sahara. So they do say like even if it wasn't Atlantis, it was something, because there is evidence of civilization there. I guess that's something I've read in blogs. I don't know how true it is, but
yeah, I don't know how true it is either, and I've read the same thing. And yeah, I guess there would be, there would be artifacts there. If it's a mountain, it's sacred. Maybe it was used as a fortress back in the Ice Age when Sahara was green, for sure. I mean, no one's got a time machine. No one knows for sure. Maybe maybe it was, but I mean,
right.
there's something interesting about it. But I mean, to me, it can't be Atlantis because
maybe Atlantis was just Doggerland. I never put that together, but maybe that was what.
That's what I'm thinking, because most of the sinking that happened, was in the. We can see where the sea levels used to be was in the Atlantic, around UK, and that's a strong part of the legend. So I'm not really seeing that in Africa. Like Jimmy did show some things which didn't convince me. He found a website showing that part of Africa actually used to be underwater at one time, so it did actually sink, and then suddenly for some reason it's no longer underwater. I don't know why. I don't know if that's accurate.
I do think when you look at, even if you just look at Google Earth, it does almost look like there was a major tsunami or some kind of like wash of, I mean, because like all the sand is like a stridation. It could look like it could be some kind of giant tsunami type event, who knows. But I mean, also the mountain range there is called Atlas. But
agreed. You're right about that. Yeah, the tsunami. Yeah, could have been the same event. Atlas. The problem with Jimmy's argument, he's fantastic, but the problem is these people that lived there were not called the Atlanteans; they were called the Atlantides, and an Atlantid is in Greek a pillar. So the reason these are the Atlas Mountains is that the Atlas was he was acting as a pillar holding up the part of the world or something, right, something like that. And so this part of the world doesn't mean Atlantic. It means it kind of means pillars, and that's sort of where the name comes from. Atlantic means of Atlantis. No, Atlantis means of the Atlantic. I tell you what, it's related, but
okay, it's some kind of relation, but yeah. Okay, so tell us your big UFO. Like, how do you tie all this into UFOs? So, what do you think UFOs are?
So, I think UFOs are a very small type of star. I don't think stars are fully nuclear. They've got nuclear reactions happening in them when they get to a certain size, but I think the phenomena is not fully understood by physicists because they refuse to tackle ball lightnings. They refuse to look at all UFOs. Alan Hynek, who worked on Project Blue Book, was a PhD astrophysicist, and he did a catalogue of all the UFO sightings. He found that most UFOs look like a round beach ball, the color of the setting sun. So it's a kind of ball, a kind of a star-like object. Mm-hmm. And this can change color. I notice it changes all the colors of that stars are in the sky. We know there are phenomena such as sonar luminescence, where a ball of fire appears in water when you vibrate that water, when you shake it around. There's so much about physics we don't quite understand how it works. And there are these ball-like things. We know about orbs. Orbs are photographed. People say it's just dust. Well, what about the other orbs? What about the ball lightnings? Are they just dust too? So this is what I think UFOs mainly are. But I don't know the whole picture about UFOs because there's some intelligence behind them. There's intelligence behind ball lightnings as well. But the thing is, I think what they mainly are is actually a comet tail coming out of the central sun inside the Earth. And that's why we get it at nighttime. That's why the UFOs occur at nighttime.
Yeah.
And it's being pushed away by our sun, and it goes literally through us. So there's phenomena. So people have seen UFOs pop up out of the water. People have seen UFOs actually fly off into space and become something like a star. I think that's part of the comet tail. That's my take on it. But I'll tell you what, that there are other aspects to the mystery which are totally baffling and totally strange. And I'm talking about UFOs masquerading as things, masquerading as submarines, masquerading as aircraft. A guy called Bruce Cornett, a ufologist in America, has done recordings of UFOs, and he's found that they actually masquerade aircraft noises, but they actually play them in reverse, like they're not even playing them properly. So it's very weird.
Yeah, I've also heard I've heard a couple of people talk about like the black helicopter phenomenon and how they've seen it morph into black helicopters and then morph back into like an orb kind of thing. So it's almost like they've used like this unmarked black helicopter as a camouflage or something. So there is one of the craziest things that people don't talk about it much, but if you really want to see some orbs, is like I did a video called on Marfa lights, and I went down to Texas, and this has been going on since the 1800s. Like the Native Americans used to go out to this one particular field to view these ball lightnings, or they don't know what they call them. They just call them the Marfa lights. And my grandmother saw them when she was a little kid. And so I've been out there 6 or 7 times. I never saw them. And finally this year I went out with the girl and I played my crop circle sounds. And I was like, I'm going to see the Marfa lights tonight. It's happening. And it happened, totally happened. But what's interesting is what you said about how you think they're stars. Well, they danced around. They were different colors or whatever for about an hour. They danced around for us. I filmed as much as I could, but it films like 10% of what it really was looking with my eyes, Anyway, this shooting star like comes like just, it looks like a regular shooting star, goes boom, and it swoops down and joins them. We were like, oh my God, what is that? What is this? What? So I think you might be onto some kind of weird thing with it being like what, like you. So you're kind of saying that the ball lightning or orbs might be our central sun or our central star inside the earth, if that's a thing. It might be a thing. It's almost some kind of expulsion of that, correct?
Yeah, these are the plasma magnetic emanations, and that's why they can join each other. They can separate, because it's, by the time it's sitting, the central sun's deep inside the earth. By the time it gets out to about where we are, it would be kind of weak. And it would be a rare phenomena as well. If it was stronger, maybe we'd see it literally all the time.
Well, Australia has the Mew. I don't know if I'm saying that. The Mew lights. Have you ever heard of that?
Min Min.
Min Min. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I can't speak English, but what? What are those? Have you ever seen that?
I haven't seen it, but what they are is the thing is they are lights in the desert, and if you're in a car, they will follow the car. And I'm thinking, why will they follow the car? It's because the car's made of metal, so that basically there's something magnetic going on. There's heaps of iron in a car, and so there's something physics going on here. But this is something physicists won't even touch, because I have to say, you know what, physics is a failure. They talk about, they lump everything in the universe into gravity, like about electric universe, and they lump everything in about UFOs into it doesn't exist. This is not physics, this is not science. Let's, we should investigate this stuff, don't you reckon?
Or they're really popular with the quantum. Everything's quantum, which we can't actually view. We don't have the instrumentation to view, but it's there. It's all, it's quirks and strings and even smaller quantum, which I'm not saying it's not, but it's, that's like, you have to take that on their word for it.
Yeah, and I have a spin on that too. I reckon they're all little types of miniature lightning. All those little particles they're seeing, they're little electrical sparks basically. And I reckon they're calling them all particles. But what they are is just more they're little. I think they're little electrical emanations, and I really think they're whether particles on, who really knows, right? Too small for us,
Right. If you can't, I don't know. I feel like if you can't do anything with these particles exactly, or manipulate them, or really get them observable on a pattern, then then you're no better than the rest of us with our ancient Earth theories in some ways. But I digress. So tell me about burial mounds, like so actually where have you physically traveled to? Because it seems like you've done a lot of traveling, and also you have like 500 something videos on YouTube, so that's crazy. So walk me through that.
So I've been to America, Serpent Mound, and in the Serpent Mound I saw British style mounds nearby, circular round barrows.
I need to go there.
Also near Serpent Mound, Ohio, there's hill fortresses in the hills made out of stone. Been around Michigan, went to the Paulding Light in northern Michigan to see that. It's basically probably car headlights, but I think it's something to do with there is actually on that road, there is actually an old power line. I reckon there might have been ball lightning shooting off that.
Wow.
And I've been around Europe, just England, Ireland, Germany, and Poland, and Netherlands, and that's it. That's all the traveling I've done, except for around Australia.
Well, that's crazy because it's like, I'm from America. I live in America, and I'm a flight attendant. I can go anywhere, and I've never been to Serpent Mound. I've never been. I've done like I've done a lot of the New Mexico, and I've done the Four Corners area. I've done all the ruins, like the Aztec and Native American ruins. I've done that. That's cool, but I have not gotten into the mounds yet. Like I know it's something I need to go in, but it's like, that's in my backyard. I could go do that now. I don't know why I'm not doing that. That's fascinating that you're from Australia and you've already come and done the mounds in the US. So that's, yeah.
Well, a few of them. I mean, you got so much. I tell you what, there's heaps in America.
Yeah. Well, it's not common knowledge though. It wouldn't be something that most people would know about or talk about, which is also kind of insane and crazy how that works. So, okay, like, what's your thing on, you said you had like or you did your dissertation on Robin Hood. Are you still fascinated with Robin Hood? Is that something that you have a thing for?
Oh yeah, I've always loved Robin Hood and the story of Robin Hood as a child, reading Rosemary Sutcliffe's books on King Arthur and Robin Hood, and and this is a mysterious character. So, you know, when I was doing this as a PhD, and my professor said to me, like, I actually wanted to do the Templars. I wanted to show that they're devil worshippers. And the professor said, no. Firstly, if you do this, you're going to have to do it in ancient Greek. You're going to have to learn Greek, do it in Greek, because that's what they were speaking over there. And secondly, I think they were good men persecuted by the Pope. And so I did Robin Hood. And he said, of course, this won't be some great political character. This will be some obscure outlaw. But I found out he was a great political character. He was a Yorkshireman, a knight. That's why he was very chivalrous. He had knightly qualities. And he was actually a guy called Robert of Twing. Twing is a village in Northern Yorkshire. And this is where all the rebels came from Yorkshire. And this guy, you want to hear about it?
Yeah, let's hear about it. Why not? Okay, I like Robin Hood.
So in 1213, you've heard of Magna Carta, right?
Yeah.
So we all know about Magna Carta. Magna Carta was some kind of proto-parliamentary movement where the nobles said, we want to have our own kind of parliament. We want to have a say. And they gave, in 1215, King John a long document. They forced him to sign it. He signed it reluctantly. But what caused this? Well, what happened was in 1213, he actually gave England to the Pope. England became a papal territory. And the nobles said, well, what does this mean? Are you no longer the king? Because the nobles hated the guy. That's why he had to do this as protection. And they said, well, what's going on now? Are we no longer nobles? And lots of Italian nobles started arriving in Britain and kind of saying, oh, we'll have a bit of that. And this guy, Robin Hood, his land was interfered with, Robert of Twing. And what happened was this. The Chief Justice of England, that was the Prime Minister of the time, was a guy called Hubert de Burgh, ancestor of Chris de Burgh, singer of Lady in Red. Oh. And he gave to this guy forged documents with the King's seal. And it stamped with the King's seal. The King didn't know about this. Henry III had no clue. And it said, to all whom it may concern, these men are allowed to do anything signed by the King. So this guy, Robert of Twing, went all around England, looting all the barns owned by these Italians and emptying them of food, selling it very cheaply to everybody, and then throwing the coins to the poor, or just giving it away. And he did this for 6 months in the whole of England. The Pope wrote letters to the king saying, what the hell is going on? The king said, I don't know what's going on. No one's telling me what's going on. And this guy, he called himself Willie Wither. Wither in Old English means Willie the Angry. But people started calling him Robert with a hood. We found in a chronicle that it actually said the monk Matthew Paris, again, he made that map that we talked about earlier. He actually wrote that this guy was he wrote 20 years later, after initially writing about this movement in 1231. He wrote 20 years later in a margin, Robertum thus palliatum, pallium is a monk's hood, and thus hooded. His men obeyed his every order, and he was a handsome young man, blah, blah, blah. And my professors said, hang on a second, this looks like the beginning of the Robin Hood legend. And I showed him all this. It's all in Latin. This is why the scholars didn't see it. And he said, this is classical Robin Hood. This is amazing. So this was a forgotten political movement in England from the 1230s. And the reason it's forgotten is no newspapers, no writing, just a few manuscripts in monasteries, a few official records. We don't know the popular culture of the day without the printing press. We don't know what people thought back then. But this was the original Robin Hood, we think. And I'm still sort of working on a paper. I've been working on it for about 5 years.
So that's awesome. So like he wasn't just a fictional character, then he really was a dude with a similar name who robbed from the rich to give to the poor, like for a political reason though. I mean, like that's pretty huge. I wish you should do that for King Arthur now. Like
King Arthur's harder. He's really
older. Yeah, like a lot less paper trail. But yeah, that's awesome. So that's pretty cool. So did he only do it for 6 months? Is that it?
No. What happened was, and this is the thing, in the later Robin Hood legends, which pop up 200 years later in ballads, in printed ballads, or 300 years later, it says firstly he was anti-clerical. He didn't like priests, and why is that? And I've explained why. And why also it said he possibly went on a crusade. It says he was active for over 20 years in Sherwood Forest. And I found out, okay, the Sherwood Forest guy was a guy in Nottingham 20 years later who said, I am Robin Hood. It was like being called Superman or Batman. It's like, I'm Batman. So Robin Hood was a criminal.
Pirate Robinson or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we found out Robert of Twing. Yes, he went on a crusade, possibly. Like the legend says, like in the Kevin Costner film, he just comes back from a crusade and he's going back to his lands. And so that's true. Yes, what happened was when he got back from the crusade, he's in the King's Palace in Windsor, and he actually punches a guy. So this guy's kind of violent as well. So he had his lands confiscated almost a second time, but then they were given back to him. And the thing is this, in the Robin Hood legends of 200 years later, Robin Hood is brought to the king pardons him. In Robert of Twing, what happens is he is brought to the king pardons him. And it says in one chronicle, if he had executed him as he had perhaps should have had done,
right,
there would have been a civil war because
like
this guy
would have lost it. Yeah. Huh. Okay.
There's so many connections.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. So then you're like a history buff through and through, all over. Like, you know, that doesn't, you're not just only focused on the ancient. You're also into I'm like that too. I love it all. But okay. So back to the megalithic culture though, real quick. Did you? I don't know. Do you have your own sorry, I can't speak today. You have your own theory on what pyramids are, and I like that. I think maybe can you just go into that just real quick?
Yeah, sure. So the pyramid seems to be the world mound. If you look at the first dynasty mastabas in Egypt, often there is a mound in the middle of them, just an earthen mound. What's that doing there? The archaeologists call it a world mound. The world mound is found worldwide, and it basically is, it is in India, it is Mount Meru. And Mer is the name of a pyramid in Egypt. And what Mera basically means, it seems to be a loan word that was introduced to Egypt. It means walls, it means oppression, it means weight, it means, in English, it means more. It means something that's very big. And the pyramid points to the four sides of the universe. In Asia, there is in Buddhist temples, there is something called the guardian of the four, the guardian of the four parts of the world. And so the pyramid, it's basically something that's placed in the middle of a country, like Silbury Hill was placed in the middle of a country on that medieval map to protect. And archaeologists kind of say the same thing. They say the pyramid was there to protect Egypt, set up by the pharaoh. The pharaoh becomes Osiris, and it's there to protect Egypt. And I'm kind of saying it was the same thing, but it's not a tomb. That's the thing. It's a world mountain, and they say it's only a tomb. If it was only a tomb, it'd be a hole in the ground. Yeah. It's massive. It's a mountain. It's huge.
I can't believe the tomb thing is even still like that. Yeah. That should have been so debunked. It's not even funny. It's crazy. But I mean, they use it all the time for everything. Even the Mexican pyramids, they'll say they were tombs for certain. You know, I don't know. It's crazy. So, and pyramids are found everywhere, right? They're
exactly. But the Egyptologists of Egypt, the archaeologists of Egypt, have based all their theories around the idea that pyramids must have arisen in Egypt. Because if they didn't arise in Egypt, they would have to become worldwide prehistorians, and they don't want to do that. They want to stay archaeologists digging in, only talking about Egypt. But if you look at the recent history of Egypt, since about the ancient period, since about the time of Christ, it's always been under someone's foreign domination, under someone's thumb. It's rarely been an independent country. So why would it even be an independent country in the prehistoric past that we don't really know about? Why would it not be under someone's a foreigner coming in, building pyramids? That makes sense to me if they built them everywhere else.
Yeah. And then so you considered the Bosnia pyramid a pyramid?
Yes, you know about that. Yes. Yeah. So the reason for that is a pyramid really just needs to be like a kind of world mountain, and you can shape a hill. You can do anything to make a pyramid look like a pyramid, look like something that's pointing to the four corners of the universe, or even it just needs to be a hill. Maybe it can be pointing to the four corners in different ways, like a line of sight to some peak on like a pimple on the hill somewhere, a little mountain somewhere. And if a pyramid is based on the world mountain, okay, it doesn't have to have four sides. It doesn't have to be built by man. It doesn't have to be built out of stone to be recognized as something really sacred. And it looks like people did modify the shape of that thing in Bosnia because it's a little bit too
perfect.
A little bit too perfect.
And it looks like a pyramid to me. And then I have two friends who've actually been there, and they're like, well, if it isn't a pyramid, then they made it into a pyramid. Like, it has constructions all over it. Like, it's something. So I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, and the other thing is the medieval capital city of what was it, Croatia or Bosnia, was placed on that hill. That's where the city was. So that was a sacred city, and that capital was placed there to legitimize the rulers of that country. So that shows that it had a huge use in ancient times, and it was hugely important.
Well, I'm always looking for, like, I went to Arkansas like a couple weeks ago, and there is this place called Pinnacle Point. It's called Pinnacle Point National Park. And then you look at it, like, even if you put that in Google, you'll see looks like a pyramid. It's a mountain peak, but it's just so perfectly. And part of me, I'm always looking for new pyramids, because like if Bosnia pyramid just found like 20 years ago, there can be other stuff that's still found. So like I feel like, I feel like America is completely ignored with our ancient past, and like there's other stuff that we don't really know what's going on here. So I'm always on the lookout for new pyramids. I'll just tell you that. Like, I'm always looking. Okay, so I don't know, like, what do you think about the lost civilization though? Like, do you think that they really were more advanced than us, or do you just think they had like a different thing? Like, sometimes I think, like, regarding like the geopolymer, or regarding like Saxe-Woman or something, like say how the stones are made, like that's something that we couldn't even do today, like the precision of that and how it's formed and everything. part of me almost thinks, you know how we discovered electricity and we run everything like electrically. I almost think there could have been another thing like that was discovered that we haven't even touched, that they touched, but they didn't discover electricity. It's almost like there could have been two different kinds of physics that were played with. What do you think? How advanced do you think these people really were?
There was a great lost civilization which was super advanced before 10,000 BC, with everything that the Mahabharata describes, the spaceships and everything. But there were also lesser advanced civilizations. For example, when we look at the Great Pyramid, we're confronted with something that seems to have been built in Khufu's time. There's a great deal of evidence for that. So we have to think, well, what level of technology was that? And basically, since the geodetic coordinates of the Earth, since the are programmed into the world, into the Great Pyramid, because it is a miniature form of a world mountain, so it has to actually be the size, a scale representation of the planet Earth, and it's been found to be the case by mathematicians. They have stated, one mathematician has stated, Livio Staccini, that the Great Pyramid should also be built by a people who had almost a space age level of science, almost a 20th century level of science. Maybe 19th century, maybe 18th century, but approaching that our level of science today. So if they had this, say, in the early 2000s BC, the early 3000s BC, then that means there were people almost like us, but maybe on a maybe not necessarily a worldwide civilization, but they had intelligence. I often think that a primitive type of computer was used to program the layout of the Giza complex, because they had to incorporate, and this was in the ancient legends, all the science of the day was incorporated in the Arab legends into the Great Pyramids. And in order to do that, you would have to run a computer program, make sure everything was placed in there in a type of code. And because what they're finding is there's mathematical overlays, and there's lots of different overlays. They're finding all these mathematical ratios and amazing things in the way the pyramids are laid out. And you have to wonder, how do they put all this in there? Did they have a type of computer? I'm almost convinced they had a primitive type of computer to do this, or very skilled mathematicians. So yeah, I think that everything that we've gone through in our own civilization, including stuff in excess of what we've developed, has been in the past. Everything, even stuff we cannot imagine today, maybe even stuff like time travel, maybe everything has happened before. And this, I find it just incredible. I mean, you look at, for example, ley lines. I think a ley line is an ancient road. Forget about the energy. I said to someone, if this is an energy line, where do I plug in my toaster? This isn't an energy line. This is an ancient road cutting across continents. They go straight across the Mediterranean as if there wasn't any water there. This is something from a different Earth, built by a superior civilization to us even.
Well, I mean, what do you think about like dimensions? Like for me, I don't know how to tackle this even, but the last like 3 or 4 years, it started out like I took some mushroom trip where I had an ego death and I saw all these damn fairies. And then I was like, oh, that's weird. I've never been obsessed with fairies or never thought anything about fairies. And then like just stone cold, like not on any kind of psychedelic, I've seen like a unicorn. I've seen, which that was a whole other thing. Like I went to this portal in Colombia that was supposed to be an Atlantis portal. That's what intrigued me to go. So like whatever, I went. I didn't see any Atlantis portal, but I did have a unicorn like tap me on the shoulder, and it was a white horse with a horn. I don't know. I guess I would call that a unicorn, but for better or for worse, it was a real life 3D physical horse that had a horn on it, and I wasn't the only one to see it. So then I've also seen like a little gnome thing before, like with my niece in the forest. I mean, I don't know. So part of me is thinking like, I never even wanted any of that stuff to be true, or maybe I just have a open third eye or something. I don't really know. But part of me thinks that if that's a thing, I don't even know, there might be interdimensions, or there might be other existences that are overlaid on top of ours. And so that's where I think maybe something with the fairy elf realm might actually be true, or it could be like ghost of remnants past, like kind of like how you were saying dinosaurs could be dragons, and maybe I don't know. So what do you think about all, have you ever touched any of that realm or thought about that at all?
Well, it's very strongly related to UFO research. There are books saying that all the fairies and gnomes of the past are just the old way of describing aliens in this day and age. Because when people have an alien encounter, they're not exactly, you know, fully conscious. They're almost, you know, under. It's almost like being under a type of sedation or something, and they're almost in a dream world. So, and this is not induced, you know. This is just induced by literally the magnetism of the UFO or whatever it is, interfering with our brains, or putting us in their world, their alternate world. So yeah, you know, I mean, this is what you mentioned about the gnome. You know, this is very common. This is, you know, people say this over and over again, and you see this in the history books as well. They say the gnomes and things. They look like little demons or little monsters sometimes. I think they're related to ghosts. The unicorn thing, sure, you know, I mean, this is possibly part of a similar phenomena. Unicorns are white. So the white lady is something that's seen quite a lot. We know apparitions of the Virgin Mary. But before that, it's not just that. It's sometimes it's a woman saying there's going to be a nuclear war. You have to prepare. You have to save the trees, save the forests.
The crystal thing or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes the whole UFO thing is what people expect to be real, something they've seen on TV, and that becomes reality when they have the UFO encounter or the close encounter or whatever is causing it. You know, I personally think it's something on our planet Earth that's generating that you know, that magnetic comet field again. But there's more to it than that. It's so complicated. We don't know what it is.
It is really weird. And I've also heard people talk about how it might be like the Earth itself is a being, and it could be like kind of like some sort of communication consciousness of the Earth herself, like manifesting, talking to the things that are on top of her. I don't know. Somebody pointed that out to me recently, and I thought, maybe, I don't know. Who knows? Like, honestly, like, who really knows? But I mean, yeah, it goes into, you know, a lot of, but it's for me, I do think it's interesting how there's been history of these kinds of things for a long time. It's not absolutely. A modern phenomenon.
It goes all the way back. It's not a modern phenomenon. I mean, there's even UFOs. I mean, in the 19th century, they were Asians in hot air balloons. That's what they called aliens in the 19th century, and they were seen over America. You know, okay. And yeah.
Yeah, and even further back than that, in the 1500s, there was like some sort of war in the sky over like Nuremberg, Germany, and then there was like this. There's also a really cool tale of this woman who pops out of a sea pod, and she was like she came. Basically, they describe a UFO that came out of the ocean in Japan. Like I think it was also in either the 1400s or 14, 15, or 1600, somewhere in there. And she lived with them for like a month and resupplied herself, and then got in her ship and left. I mean, there's crazy legends all over the place that you hear about, that you're kind of going like, what? That's amazing. Crazy. But so basically I'm just saying none of this is a new phenomenon. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So tell us about some of your other books. Like what should people buy from you? Which books is like your book?
Well, it's probably, see, the Pyramids book is probably a little bit too long. So the good book is Confessions of the Gods. And I did that sort of as an homage to the Ancient Astronauts books of the 60s and 70s. So it's short, it's easy to read. I made it like a little bit goofy, a bit funny.
And I noticed the cover has like, isn't that Aleister Crowley's lamb on it or something? Or
yes,
yeah,
it is. That image, however, is also used to describe Boskop Man, who had an enormous head found in South Africa. And when they found him, they said, this guy's more modern than modern man, because basically it's an example of neoteny. So neoteny is for example, a whale, a sperm whale you mentioned earlier, it looks like a huge fetus. So a sperm whale, being a very huge giant creature, is very neotenous. And it might be a thing that the bigger the creature, the more neotenous it is. So basically the juvenile form carries through into an adulthood. Humans are more neotenous than chimpanzees. A chimpanzee baby looks like a human. A chimpanzee adult looks like a different creature. So that looks like a human baby, and an adult looks like a different creature. So what was my point again? My point was basically this creature, bigger skull, bigger frontal brain than modern man, found in South Africa. Was he the ancient giant? And so I put him on the cover. Is he the Nephilim? So I even wrote on my website, this is not an alien, because someone attacking me on Facebook said, "Oh, this guy's into aliens. I saw his book." It's not an alien. It's a representation of the Boscott man. But if it's Aleister Crowley's lamb, how did he get this lamb vision? Is this something from the past, something from the future, broadcasting into his brain, and he was inspired to draw something that looks like an alien?
Well, and it's like they always talk about the egregore, like the thought form. Like they created that thought form, but it could have been, who knows, like exactly what you're saying, from the past. That's a good book to get then, if we want to get some. Okay, cool. I want to check that out for sure. And then I also saw that you do tours in Australia.
I did. I stopped before I went to America in 2017, and then I didn't start them up again. But I was doing a ghost tour. I was doing a crime tour. They were both very popular. And then I was doing an architecture tour. We have a street called Collins Street, best street in Australia, old banks from the 19th century. And that wasn't very popular at all. People just wanted to do the crime and the ghosts. So
I've done a couple of those tours, like not as a tour guide, but as a person going on them. Like I did one in Edinburgh, like a ghost tour in Edinburgh, and you went into the sewers, it was cool. I liked it. So yeah, those are really cool. Okay, and then so what's your future plans? What are you trying to do now?
Well, actually, believe it or not, so I'm doing a diploma. I'm going to move into the financial world, mortgage broking. And so I'm working on that. And it's so hard to do YouTube and that at the same time. I tell you what, so I might take a bit of a break from YouTube.
Just do it less frequency. Don't quit YouTube. You're so good. You really are.
You. Maybe, yeah. Maybe that's a good idea, actually. Just maybe once a month, and yeah.
Yeah, like just do one video a month and stuff. I think people would still be like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But you've been very prolific on YouTube so far, and I really, really, I think it's awesome. And people can support you on. You have a big Patreon page, is that right?
Yeah, Patreon, and I've got Patreon, and they can have a look at that if they want, and also my homepage, charlescost.com. They can have a squiz. I've put so many of the theories there in writing, so they can have a look at that as well.
Ugh, I love your theories. I don't want you to become a muggle. Don't get all into finance and then forget about all this stuff. It's too cool. There's enough people doing muggle things. There's not enough Charles Cosses. So that's true. Yeah, there should be more. Okay, so this has been an awesome time. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So tell us real quick where everybody can find you, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, so all the theories are on YouTube. The channel is Charles Cost, KOS, and you can check it all out. And also the same name for my website, charlescost.com, and all the theories are there. And I put them there because I think people, I've come up with some ideas, and I think people got to know that there's more to the ancient past than what Wikipedia says, basically.
Awesome. Super cool. All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Nikki.